There's a new book that I would like to discuss with you, and it's called Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Martyr, Prophet, Spy. And it's by Eric Metaxas. And Metaxas has given us a wealth of information, very valuable biography of the 20th century theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who became a victim of Nazi Germany by standing with those who were oppressed. And what I love about this book is that it helps us understand how Bonhoeffer put Christ at the center of everything. All of his theology and all of his ethics come out of the life of Christ. He even wrote a book called Christ the Center. And this, Christ being at the center of his life, led him to stand with those who were oppressed, led him to stand with the Jews. And this, I think, is incredibly important for 21st century Christians to understand, that Christ bids us to stand with those who are the victims of culture. This may be the most crucial aspect that we can learn from Bonhoeffer, but there are questions that I want to ask about this book, and one of those is, what is the reason that Bonhoeffer stands with the Jews? One of the main questions in Bonhoeffer studies is whether Bonhoeffer stands with the Jews for the Jews being Jewish as the people of God, or does he stand with the Jews in order to evangelize them? This is one of the great questions that's going on in Bonhoeffer studies today, and Metaxas leaves that open. He alludes to it, but he doesn't answer the question. And maybe the issue is that he can't answer the question because Bonhoeffer never answers the question. It would have been nice to have heard Metaxas say that. Now, the second issue that I want to bring up is the plot to assassinate Hitler. If Bonhoeffer sees Christ as the center of everything, how does this action get justified? Because Jesus never kills anyone, never plans to kill anyone, but rather becomes the victim of culture. So how does Bonhoeffer come to this decision? And Metaxas seems to suggest that Bonhoeffer thought that this was the will of God for him, and that Bonhoeffer rejoiced in it. He says this on page 377. God had driven him to this place, and he was not about to look for a way out any more than Jeremiah had done. It was the fate he had embraced, and it was obedience to God, and he could rejoice in it, and he did. So Metaxas seems to suggest that this plan to assassinate Hitler was the will of God. But how do you get there from the life of Christ? Now, people disagree with Metaxas. Stanley Hauerwas has written a book called Performing the Faith, Bonhoeffer and the Practice of Nonviolence. So how can people come to these different views on Bonhoeffer and this plan to assassinate Hitler? Well, it's because Bonhoeffer never explicitly says that this was the will of God. Metaxas has this quote, but he doesn't get it from Bonhoeffer himself. It seems as though Metaxas is kind of riffing off of what he assumes Bonhoeffer would have thought. It seems to me that a much more faithful response, if Christ is at the center, is that Bonhoeffer sees this not so much as the will of God, but that we live in a sinful world, and sometimes that means that maybe we have to move away from Christ and seek to kill people. This is a sin, and it's something that we need to be forgiven for. And throughout Metaxas's book, he says that Bonhoeffer says pretty much just this, that we live in a sinful world, and sometimes we have to participate in sin, and that's why we ask for forgiveness. Interestingly enough, if Metaxas is right about Bonhoeffer seeing this violence, this assassination attempt to kill Hitler, as the will of God, mimetic theory helps us to see that Bonhoeffer and Hitler are enemy twins, because Bonhoeffer sees this as the will of God, and Metaxas says that all of these assassination attempts to kill Hitler that don't work out end up allowing Hitler to see that providence is on his side. Hitler doesn't use the term God, but this transcendent providence. So this fate is leading Hitler to dominate, to kill, to use acts of violence. So there's this transcendent quality that they're both reaching after, that allow them to justify these violent acts. And I think that Bonhoeffer is different because he doesn't see this as the will of God or the will of providence, but sees this as something that he needs to be forgiven for. So those are my thoughts on Bonhoeffer and the book Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Martyr, Prophet, Spy. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks.